Welcome to another deep dive today. This time, we're going to be talking about a story you probably think you know, Noah's Ark. But we're going to go a little deeper than that, a little deeper than the Sunday school version, because we're going to be looking at this story through the lens of an ancient text called the Book of Jasher. This book gives us another angle on some of those familiar events from the Bible. So yeah, today we're hoping to uncover some details you may not have heard before.
The Book of Jasher, it doesn't just repeat what we already know. It actually adds a whole other layer, offering these little glimpses into events and details that you don't really find in the traditional biblical narratives.
Exactly. Like, we all picture Noah, peacefully leading all the animals, 2 by 2, onto the ark. But Jasher actually paints a bit more, I guess you could say, a dynamic picture.
Oh, absolutely. Jasher describes Noah just sitting by the ark patiently as the animals all come to him. Some of them, they come humbly, crouching down, ready to go. But others, well, they're a bit more, let's say, hesitant. It's definitely not the organized little parade we usually imagine.
Okay, now this is where things get really interesting. Jasher tells this story about a lioness and her cubs. And get this, the cubs actually attack their mom, causing her to run away. Noah takes the cubs onto the ark, but the mother lioness is left behind.
Whoa, right.
This detail, it might seem small at first, but it really makes you think, what could it symbolize? I mean, some scholars think it represents this disruption of the natural order, like the world is on the brink of chaos. Others think it's more of a test of Noah's obedience, showing how committed he was to God's instructions, even when it was hard. It really makes you wonder about the bigger picture, doesn't it? What do you think about all this?
It definitely changes how you look at this story. And there's more to it than that. Most people assume the rain started right away, but Jasher actually says there was a whole week before the flood. And it wasn't just a light rain either. We're talking earthquakes, darkness, violent storms. God was sending some very clear warning signs. Yeah, and even with all that, the people just refused to listen to Noah. They wouldn't repent. They wouldn't change their ways. It's sad because we still see that kind of thing happening today,
It really seems like some people just don't get it until it's too late.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, there's this crazy scene in Jasher where 700,000 people try to get on the ark after the rain starts. They're begging Noah to let him in, saying they're sorry, but it's already too late.
Yeah, for anyone who's not familiar with this whole flood event, it's a pretty big deal in these Abrahamic traditions. It's about divine judgment and about how humanity needs redemption. And this whole last-minute scramble that Jasher describes, it really tells us something about human nature, don't you think? Like, maybe we don't appreciate something until we're about to lose it.
That's a really good point. Now, we should also mention, not everyone agrees that the Book of Jasher is like a literal history book. Some scholars see it more as an allegory, full of symbols and metaphors. Others see it as this blend of history and storytelling tradition. But no matter how you categorize it, it's a fascinating look at what it means to be human.
Exactly. It's not just about the events themselves, but what they all mean. And speaking of challenges, let's talk about the ark's journey. It wasn't exactly smooth sailing, was it? Jasher says the ark was tossed around violently. Total chaos for Noah, his family, all those animals.
I keep thinking about those 7 days of warning, Do you think Jasher is trying to emphasize free will here? Like, people had a choice, and they chose to ignore those warnings.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Jasher doesn't hold back on describing the raw emotions of this whole experience. The animals are roaring and howling in terror. Everyone's afraid for their lives. It almost feels like Jasher's saying, even when you're on the right path, even when you're headed towards something good, you're still going to face uncertainty and fear.
I can totally relate to that. It reminds me of this one time I was racing to catch a flight. I was freaking out. But of course, this was way more serious, right? It wasn't just a vacation on the line, it was the whole world.
And that brings up a really important question. How does this part of the story connect to us today?
We all go through tough times, our own metaphorical storms, right?
Right. It seems like Jasher's saying that sometimes you have to go through a turbulent time to reach a peaceful resolution. Even when you're headed in the right direction, there will be challenges and moments of doubt. But it's all about how you respond to those challenges, how you hold on to faith and resilience when everything's chaotic.
Exactly. It's not about being superhuman. It's about being human and acknowledging those feelings. And speaking of enduring hardship, there's this other detail that people often miss. Noah and his family stayed inside the ark for a whole year after the floodwaters went down. They didn't just hop right off. There was this long period of waiting. A whole year. Wow. Talk about a quarantine. I can't even imagine what that must have been like psychologically. So what are some of the interpretations of this extended stay? Was it a time for reflection, maybe a purification process, or even a test of patience.
The Book of Jasher definitely emphasizes this waiting period.
Not
It
too
makes
many.
you wonder what it all meant. It makes you think, what was its significance?
Yeah. I guess the journey wasn't really over until that year had passed, even though the immediate danger was gone. It makes you wonder what Noah and his family went through during all those months inside the ark. But I guess we'll have to wait until part 2 to delve into that.
It's amazing how Jasher really expands on that whole being stuck on the ark thing, you know? It doesn't just skip over that year. It actually goes into what it was like for them.
Right, like we're getting this inside look at the human side of the story, all those quiet moments they must have had, thinking and maybe even doubting, inside the ark.
Exactly. And when they finally do get off the ark, Jasher says Noah and his family went back to their old ways and places, like rebuilding their lives in this totally new, clean world. It's a powerful image of starting over.
It really is, especially these days, with everything going on, this idea of renewal, of hope after devastation. It's something we see throughout history, isn't it?
Absolutely. And what's interesting is that Jasher says Noah and his sons kept serving God even after the flood was over.
Oh yeah, like they took those hard lessons and applied them to their new lives.
Yeah.
It makes you think that maybe, even though it was traumatic, the whole experience made their faith stronger. Do you think that's what Jasher's getting at? That even the worst experiences can lead to spiritual growth?
It's definitely a possibility. And don't forget about God's blessing on Noah and his family. They were told to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth again, almost like a reset for humanity, a chance to learn from the past and do better.
That makes me think about something. We talked about that lioness incident as a symbol of disruption, but couldn't it also be about the strength of a mother's love? You know, even in the middle of chaos, Jasher talks a lot about family throughout the story.
That's a great point. I think that's one of the cool things about Jasher. It can be interpreted in different ways. Maybe the lioness represents both disruption and the power of family love, showing us that those things never go away, even in the darkest times.
I love how Jasher has all these layers of meaning. It's not just a simple retelling, it's exploring all these complex things about human nature and our connection to God.
You got it. And this whole idea of resilience ties into another cool thing about Jasher. It really focuses on what Noah and his family were going through emotionally and mentally.
Yeah, it's not just about the flood itself, but also about their inner struggles, right? It makes them feel more real, more human.
For sure. Jasher doesn't shy away from their fear, their uncertainty, even their doubts. It reminds us that even people who are chosen for something big still feel all the normal human emotions.
It's that honesty that makes the story so powerful, so relatable. We all face challenges. We all have those moments of doubt. It seems like Jasher's saying it's okay to feel those things. It's about what you do with them, how you come out stronger on the other side.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that even in extraordinary situations, it's okay to feel scared, to question things, to have doubts. It's about what you do next, how you use your inner strength to keep going.
Okay, so we've talked about the animals, the timeline, how people reacted to the flood, what happened afterward, and this theme of resilience. What do you think is the biggest takeaway for our listeners? What's that one piece of wisdom they should remember from this deep dive into Jasher?
I think what's most amazing about Jasher is how it makes this old story feel new again. It goes deeper than a simple retelling and explores the emotional and spiritual aspects, reminding us that even ancient texts can still speak to us today.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It really has. It shows how powerful storytelling is and how much wisdom there is in these old stories.
It really has been amazing to unpack this story we all thought we knew and find all these hidden meanings. It's like peeling back layers of an onion or something. You just keep finding more depth and complexity.
Oh, I love that analogy. And as we're wrapping up our deep dive into the Book of Jasher's take on Noah's Ark, I can't help but think about the bigger picture. You know, we've talked about the historical side, the allegorical side, but how does all this apply to our lives today?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's easy to get caught up in the scale of the flood, how huge it was. But what can we learn from it for our own lives?
Well, we've been talking about the flood as this literal event, right? This massive disaster that changed the world. But what if we see it as a metaphor for the challenges we all face? What are our own personal floods? Those tough times that feel like they might overwhelm us.
I see what you mean. Like when you're stressed out or uncertain about things or even grieving, it's like the weight of the world is on your shoulders and you have to face your fears and make tough decisions.
Exactly. And just like Noah had to make a huge change in his life because of the flood, sometimes we have to reevaluate our priorities, our values, our whole way of living. Those tough times force us to adapt, to change, and hopefully to come out stronger on the other side.
That reminds me of something else from Jasher. Remember how Noah and his family were stuck in the ark for a whole year, even after the water went down? Maybe it wasn't just about being physically safe, but also about changing on the inside.
That's a great point. You could see it as a time for them to look inward, to heal, and to prepare for the challenge of rebuilding. Maybe Jasher is saying that real growth happens not during the storm, but in the quiet time afterward, when you have the space to think about what you went through and learn from it.
Wow, that's really insightful. So the flood isn't just about destruction, it's also about cleansing, a fresh start. And that year inside the ark, maybe that represents the time it takes to really go through those changes and come out transformed.
You got it. And I think that's something everyone can relate to. We all have those floods in our lives, those times of crisis. But the Book of Jasher shows us that those times can also help us grow, to renew ourselves, and to find our inner strength.
It's a reminder that even when things are really bad, there's always hope for a better future.
Perfectly said. So, to our listener, we want you to think about this. What are your own floods? And how can you face them with the same courage, faith, and resilience that Noah and his family had?
We really encourage you to check out the Book of Jasher yourself. You might be surprised by what you find. There's a lot of wisdom in there, even though it's an ancient text. You might even see this story, the one you thought you knew, in a whole new light.
That's right. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into all this fascinating knowledge out there.
And remember, there's always more to discover than you think.